All right, and we are live. So welcome to this final session of today. We know we are the only thing standing between you and the gala dinner. When we don't feel any pressure from that. Good of you to come. So this session is titled The NRENs and the Outside World. It's meant to be a session about the tradition for collaboration between the NRENs, the research networks in Europe, and industrial partners, about joint innovation, about the potential for jointly developing new technologies, or jointly trying out new things, and paving a way forward for a new and better internet. And to discussing how do we do that, and how do we harvest the potential for doing that, is something we've been doing a lot in the past. It's something we aren't doing that much anymore. And it's worth discussing, is this something we should be putting more of an effort into, and if it is, then how are we going to do that? In order to discuss that, we have put together a panel with 3 esteemed members of our industrial partnerships, who each will give you a short introduction to how they see the area, and then I hope that this being a panel discussion, that you will have a whole bunch of questions to ask our experts, and that we can engage in a discussion. So I have, in order to get the discussion going, asked my panelists here to be a little provocative, to lighten up the discussion a little bit. So because of that, I think I should put the caveat on that each of the panelists are speaking for themselves in their own capacity as members of our community and with the background they have, and not necessarily speaking on behalf of the companies that pay their salary. And I'm sure that if you want to know the official opinions of these companies, you will probably know where to go to get that opinion. That said, we have 3 panelists. We have Klaas Wierenga from Cisco. Klaas has been in the NREN community for many years as an employee of SurfNet, and at some point managed to escape and joined Cisco, and still manages to be engaged with this community and with this conference, and in fact is going to be, I believe, chairman of the conference the next year, the conference program committee next year. So I think most of you know Klaas. Then we have Rodney Wilson. He's been at what is now Ciena for many years as a Director of Outside Research, and many of us know him as the Ciena Director of Demos and Crazy Experiments, and Rodney is involved in many technologies that are being demonstrated at this conference, and several experiments that many of us are doing with him. And we have Klapwijk, who has been with Level 3 for about 15 years, and since the start of this year has been responsible for the commercial relations to NRENs and the NRE sector in Europe. So each of them people who have been with this community for many years and have a lot of experience dealing with this community and talking about it from an industrial perspective. So to get things going, I thought I was going to ask each of you to give a short background about yourself, about your company, and your basic views on collaboration between NRENs and the outside world. So Klaas, would you kick it off?
Yeah, so I guess that it's more or less parallel to with my own career, the way I see this relation evolving. When I was at SurfNet for 13 years, Cisco was a very natural partner for the NRENs. We would together fight the telecoms monopolies, the big switch vendors from Ericsson and Nortel, and we were sort of natural allies. But then the internet became something not only for the research community, but it became the communication medium for the world, and that has really changed business for a company like Cisco. So when I joined Cisco 6.5 years ago, I pretty soon found out that where I was still thinking that enterprises would find NRENs extremely cool and interesting, and we should do as much projects with them as possible, I found that that was not at all the case anymore. As all of our companies here are on this world to make money, and there is a lot of pressure to focus your efforts towards those sectors where you can make the most money, and Cisco at least doesn't perceive the NRENs as such anymore. So that means that you need to have other good reasons to work with the NREN community, and that reason would be to do things that you could not easily do with other customers, service providers, large enterprises, but with the NREN community, because they are willing to test new technologies, to do unproven solutions, and essentially together with you develop the solutions that you can then later on sell into those other market segments. And to be honest, that is very challenging for Cisco at the moment, to basically make the case for doing that. It used to be very easy. What happened in the NREN community, what the universities did, would find its way in a few years later probably in enterprise environments, in service providers. That is not automatically the case anymore. And I think that is for me the big tension, and that is where we have to find a solution.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Rodney?
so I'm based in Ottawa, Canada, in Ciena's research and development labs. I'm responsible for external research activities, which includes collaboration with the likes of you. I'd like to take exception to the title of this presentation, for starters, because it's called The Outside World. And as members of the Ciena community, as paying and full members, I am as inside of this community as any one of the people here. So I'm not sure I want to participate because the entire premise is flawed. I digress. There are two reasons that our participation with this community is very interesting. The first is it's not an insignificant market segment. You represent a significant portion of government-funded enterprise networks, and so my colleagues that sell solutions into this marketplace find it worthwhile. That being said, you challenge us because you're always asking for the very latest technologies, the stuff that's barely out of the lab, and frankly, you'd like it for free or such a deeply discounted price that it causes us to pull out our hair. Perhaps I'm evidence of that. Nonetheless, there are challenges in trying to deploy the very latest technology in a demanding experimental kind of environment. So that brings me to the second reason why we participate. And it is very much an opportunity to explore emerging technologies, emerging architectures and solutions. And this is where Ciena extracts its great value. That's why we are a participant in research projects around the world. That's why we invest money in collaborative activities with universities. And that's why we undertake challenging demonstrations, stuff that are world's firsts or truly unique stretch objectives. We believe strongly that some, or if not a great measure, of the activities that are undertaken within the NREN community and within the research and education network is a harbinger, is a forecast of technologies that are going to be needed in the future. So while we may not productize or development everything that we learn in this community, it's an education for us, and we extract tremendous value from those collaborations. And at the same time, it allows us to showcase where the edges of computer communication science technology is.
Thank you. Jens?
So, good afternoon, everybody. Jens Klapwijk, Level 3 Communications, working in that company for almost 15 years. I'm based in Amsterdam. For those who don't know Level 3 Communications, and I hope there are not that many, we operate a global backbone, global network infrastructure, providing services to everybody who needs network services, also to the NREN community. I wanted to make sure that you fully understand that we don't only sell dark fiber solutions, but services on top of the backbone. I'm responsible for the NREN community in Europe since the beginning of this year, so I'm trying to find my way around, which is quite a challenge, so to say. All the RFPs that I'm trying to answer is quite a job, and I fully agree with the two gentlemen sitting on this stage as well. Sometimes it's so time-consuming, but it's worth it, and I wanted to make sure that you understand that. I represent Level 3. I'm here, and I'm here that the industry is understanding that we really want to cooperate with you, collaborate with you, and maybe going forward in a more friendly way to the companies that are sitting here. Thank you.
Thank you. The one thing that strikes me, of course, is that you represent two different types of companies. A company that does a little bit of everything, including video, and we usually think of the router company, but there's also video and services, and a company that we traditionally think of as a transport company that has optical technology, and a service provider, right? So that might also affect at which point in the innovation curve, for example, you can work with the likes of us. But I wanted to, at this point, go ask the audience if there are opinions, questions that you want to bring up. Anybody wanting to ask the panel about things, or raise some points about how we collaborate with industry?
If you don't volunteer, we might just ask you.
Yeah. Right, so I think I'll kick off a little bit. No.
Yeah, you asked me to come here, so...
Yeah, good, Sabine. Thank you. I should be paying attention. Thank you very much, Sabine.
Sabine Jom, Renata, the French NREN. I think one of the issues which is quite important to work with you is, of course, new services, new areas, but also training. And especially, I think, in some areas of the world, there is a big asset for you to work with the NREN community, because they have to learn. And joining efforts between NRENs and existing NRENs and yourselves and new possible NRENs is something that I see as very important.
Well, since we were asked to be a bit provocative, Cisco does a tremendous amount of development work in Africa, South America, other parts of the world. Donates tons of equipment, sponsors NSRC, organizations like that. But it is kind of sucky, if you pardon me the expression, if you do all that work and then the friends from China come in and make a harbor and win every deal there. So I think, and it's very present in those countries, but to some extent also in mature markets like in Europe. There is much of it is dictated by the procurement cycles, where you just have to be the cheapest, well, or economic most advantageous, which has a strong weight for being cheap, and there is little room for real, truly joint working on things, because before you know it, your investment cycle is over and there's a new procurement, and if you lose that, then from what I see around the NRENs in Europe, most of the joint work then stops, because the new development work is done with the new incumbent provider. So I think I like your question, but I'd like to take it also to the rest of the world and say, I think the secret is a more sustainable collaboration.
Well, I think I disagree to a certain degree. If there's one thing that's true about the R&E space, is there's no shortage of meetings. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah, I mean, you can travel to every continent in the world. You can go at various different levels. You guys meet more frequently than anyone else I've met. You meet more frequently than physicians. However, this also represents an advantage and opportunity, because it's an opportunity for vendors or any collaborator or contributor to present a paper, to provide education to the participants, to be involved in the community in sharing things that may be orthogonal to what you're looking for today, but something that might be our strategy or direction, or some new technology or invention. So while the traditional approach to training and sharing knowledge, is looking obviously for a business case or a quid pro quo, I think that this community offers more than anyone else an opportunity to come in and state a position, state a strategy, describe technologies, describe architectures, describe the results of experiments or things that you'd like to try, and that is precisely the reason that we extract such great value from the collaboration. And it's not always successful, but it's always kind of fun.
Yeah, Jan.
Well, I'm thinking more when I read the title of this panel discussion.
Which is wrong. I pointed that out before.
I considered more the interaction between the NRENs, or the NREN society, the NREN networks, and the perhaps local society, the local world, the people we live together with. And in fact, my question or my idea mostly goes towards Jens, I think. How do you feel about research networks buying connectivity for, well, I'd say a fair price. Most likely you'd say too cheap. But then again, we'd like to donate this connectivity to some of our friends, which might be different organizations which are relatives to us. But that's in competition with you as a capacity provider, isn't it?
To be honest, I don't get the question correctly. So if you can try to
give an example.
Give an example, maybe.
Well, it's mostly that, for instance, in Denmark we have the research network covering most of the country, because we have universities spread all over. Then from time to time there might be some institution or some organization who would like to have some capacity across Denmark, and that would be very expensive if they were going to the normal vendors to get this capacity. And as they're not too greedy, they can easily fit into our network.
But you're thinking about museums, or
that could be museums or sports events or something like that, which, well, shouldn't be allowed to connect to the research network because they're not really a research institution, but they're somehow friends. They do something good for the society, and we like them.
Now I understand. Thank you for explaining deeper. Let's phrase it like this: that we're always open for those type of discussions. I do not agree with being very expensive. That's indeed what you just said. Okay, you probably disagree. Indeed, that's the case. Quality has its price. But indeed, if there are, the way you describe it is more like a resale model, and I'm not sure if this industry is made for that, to be honest. But we can always have that discussion. I'm open for that.
I mean, your point before was about being responsible to shareholders, and you know, we have fiscal responsibilities, but there's some great examples of how exactly what you suggest to happen on a temporary basis. One of my best examples is every year the High Performance Computing Conference that takes place in the United States. And so a network is built to facilitate the research community's demonstrations. And a number of research organizations around the world, not just American ones, go to this conference to allow students to demonstrate their science projects, to publish papers and present them. The network itself, which is called Ciena, only exists because of an incredible collaboration between the vendors. And you're looking at 3 vendors here who every year invest tens of thousands of dollars specifically along the lines of working together, checking our corporate egos at the door, and really finding ways to collaborate and build an infrastructure that offers hundreds of gigabits per second connectivity, both at services and services, just for that conference. And indeed, we've done it here at Ciena in the past as well. So, Level 3 Ciena and Cisco are 3 great examples of companies that collaborate to address exactly the kind of thing that you're referencing, but usually on a temporary basis. So, so last year I had over $30 million worth of equipment on loan to Ciena, which I could afford to do for 60 days, but I couldn't afford to do that as a donation to a traveling roadshow.
Yeah, and in that sense, of course, even though we were asked to be a bit provocative, the reason that we are here at this conference, I think it's my 18th or so, and I guess you are not that far from it.
Get around.
So we do believe in this community, and we do our best to support the community. What I'm just putting on the table is that it is sometimes challenging, and some of the faithful industrial members of Terena, for instance, have disappeared because they couldn't justify coming here anymore. And I think it is worth investigating why that might be the case.
So, yes, Sabine, while the microphone is being brought down, I'd like to link what Sabine asked before to what Jan was asking. Oh, Michael.
You can use this.
Michael, you get next. Because both of them are, in a certain sense, about social responsibility and social engagement, right? Some NRENs, mine, for example, have, as part of our charter, an obligation to further the development of society for the benefit of the general public, and see to technology evolves and is distributed and all that kind of thing. And I think this is one reason that some NRENs like Resale engage in Africa and try to help developing areas get NRENs off the road and things like that. But then I sometimes talk to people from, for example, ISAC, who feel they have the same kind of social responsibility agenda and try to do the same thing, and I realize that what they are doing and that what we are doing in the same regions often are with absolutely no coordination. And I hear sometimes from projects that some of you guys are doing in the same countries that also seem to be coordinated neither with ISAC or with us. And I'm thinking, are there possibilities of doing this in a better way? Is this something we can look at? Or is it just too difficult? I don't know.
Lars, one of the things that makes it work, and you're really talking about virtual teams, is alignment to a specific goal or a target or an objective. So if you define a goal or a challenge and you solicit participation, then you get buy-in and the coordination happens. If you try and that's how you create an effective virtual team. If on the other hand you kind of have a mash of things and expect something to congeal ad hoc, everybody's going to come in with their corporate agenda and push whatever it is they're pushing.
Right.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to what you said just previously, and saying that with my NREN hat on, when we organize a conference, a national conference, and with my a Terena member hat on about Terena conference, it's very important that you are engaged and that you provide sponsorship or you help with the network, etc. It's crucial because it's also a way to work with you. And then what we do is we try to be in a win-win situation, so to offer you a place where you can meet the users, the future users. And I think this is really important, and I want to thank all the industrials for what they are doing for the national conferences by providing help or equipment and so on. I think this is really important.
That's a real challenge. What, there are 33 NREN members of Terena, and there are 33 conferences that would like our sponsorship. Not going to happen, right? So, but if we can focus and leverage the strength of Terena, it works quite well. And
yeah, and if you the thing is, you can only spend every dollar, in my case, once. And so you have to choose. And if I then, let me just for 1 minute take you along on the day for an account manager. They typically, in the case of Cisco in higher education, they serve universities and the NREN. They have a base salary, and the rest, at least half of the salary is based on bonuses, on getting contracts in, if not more. And now they can choose. They have their hours, they have their marketing budget, and they can spend it only once. Either they go to one of their friendly universities that buy their Wi-Fi equipment, that buy their WebEx video conferencing, that buy their access infrastructure, and or they go and spend a hell of a lot of time at the NREN, because you guys are all extremely convinced of your own right. You know exactly what you want, and you will not believe the vendor if they say, no, that's not what you want, you actually want this. In fact, you vote with your feet if the vendor tries to sell you something that you think you don't want or you don't need. So there is this once every 4 or 5 year, this multi-million contract on the table. And I have seen now a couple of times the amount of time that goes into preparing a bid. It's an incredible amount. And then you lose that bid. And you're an account manager. And your income is based on how much business you generate at an NREN. And you know the next 4 years there's nothing, or very limited. What are you going to do? You move to another sector. And so if you look at corporate level, we all see the importance of this. But if you're on the ground trying to sell things, you're not measured against that. You're not measured against the long term. And there is no easy answer to that.
Maybe I can add something here as well, is that the formal tender procedures doesn't allow you to bring in alternatives that might fit better, and that is what I'm missing in all the tenders that are coming my way or I'm trying to answer. So if there is more flexibility that we can deal with that would be helpful.
No, my point was just before giving back the mic to Michael, that behind NRENs you have users. Yeah. So even if you don't have a deal with the NREN, you still have users, universities, research centers that have networks. And of course it's not the same products, it might not be the same market, etc. But definitely branding the name of the company is something important.
I understand, and that is actually it's an argument that I use all the time, also internal Cisco. So that is a point. But of course, they are also very well connected to the universities. Don't make a mistake about that. So they may not see so much value in it as we may see.
I guess it depends a little bit on the corporate philosophy. I come from the CTO group. I'm responsible for looking at new technologies. So if you're an NREN that is doing world's first really exciting next generation technologies, then I'm going to move towards you. If, on the other hand, you're a commodity internet provider offering different ISP services at a discount to, carrier services, that's good. That's good for education, but it's not going to be very attractive to me. I have 3 currencies that I spend. One is money, and it's really hard to come by. I never have enough of it. The second is equipment. So equipment can be a currency, and so I can loan equipment, sometimes deploy test equipment or new or emerging technologies. The third currency I have is actually the most valuable, and that's access to our people, our high-quality people, the scientists and engineers and developers that we have that are actually monetizing, industrializing the research that are being developed in your universities and colleges. And that's kind of my perspective when we look at this.
So, Michael.
Okay, so I'm Michael Enrico, I'm CTO at Dante. I've got 3 questions actually, one for each of the panelists, and they're slightly unrelated, so I'm not going to ask them all at once. I'll scatter them throughout the session. So my first one actually is to Klaas, and it's a kind of going back to the point about the value you see in dealing with the NREN community, because they're a bit more adventurous about trying out new technologies. So over the years of your experience, do you see the community getting more or less adventurous in trying out new technologies?
Less.
I agree.
That was a very short answer.
Yeah, I mean, I can expand a little bit on that. I actually think that that trend that I was talking about, the internet becoming the communication medium for the world, actually that same thing you also see at the universities. It's not acceptable anymore if there is downtime. Unfortunately, I think many NRENs have developed into an ordinary ISP. And if I have to choose which ordinary ISP to do business with, and luckily I'm also in the CTO office, so I don't have to think those thoughts, but if I am in the sales organization and I have to choose who to do business with, then I probably would focus on those that generate a lot of money. I think this is very risky. I think this is actually risky for the existence of the NRENs. So I think it is important for the NRENs to keep finding those challenges, those man on the moon type of challenges. And I believe that the industry, at least I think I can speak for this panel, that the likes of us happily work with you on that.
Another question related to this one this time. So do you...
Still for me?
Still, well, for everybody, actually, yeah.
That was good, by the way. You can think.
So the NREN community prides itself, has over the years, on being the bleeding edge. Are they still as much at the bleeding edge as they maybe were some years ago?
In some areas.
Yeah, I'd agree.
If I talk for the area that I am most familiar with, middleware, identity, federations, that kind of stuff, absolutely. And that is because you guys have a culture of collaboration, you have a culture of sharing of knowledge. My colleagues in sales, for instance, are always surprised that the Canadian NREN knows how much SurfNet paid for their routers. And I said, yes, that's because, as you alluded to, these guys fly all over the world and meet each other and talk to each other because they are not direct competitors. And in the rest of the industry, you don't see that. But yes, to your question,
how about at lower layers? Because in my experience, I've seen at higher layers, and I include, by the way, AAI software and things like this. Then I would quite agree with you. At the IP layer, for example, who were the networks that first rolled out IPv6 in native mode, multicast support, and so on. But a lot of NRENs, it occurs to me, a lot of the community spend a lot of time these days running transmission networks.
Yeah, but IPv6 I don't think that is the challenge anymore.
But it was.
It was. The NRENs were the first,
ago,
and now that's not where you are, where you can be different from the rest of the world anymore. So what is the new thing on those lower layers? Is it in the optical layer? Is that where the excitement is? I don't know. I would argue.
I'm pretty excited about
some would be excited about that. I'd say, well, 10 gig, 40 gig. Oh, you just swap your interface card. Big deal. More of the same. It's all Ethernet, and well.
I mean, there is some of that going on, but we then come back to the tension of how many interesting things do we do with the network, and how much do we risk breaking it?
And I think that's
operator thinking, right?
Yeah.
But Rodney.
So I think that's a really good perspective. The gap between, cutting edge, the time lag between cutting edge and sort of common commercial usage is kind of a good spectrum to look at. Last year we had the Advanced North Atlantic 100 gig, the first 1 by 100 gig transatlantic transmission, and normally in the past, NRENs might have that for many months and have that kind of leadership position for some duration. And of course, no sooner was it announced within the research community that was available commercially, and Level 3 was offering services on it, on that kind of thing, or other submarine vendors. Another interesting example is things like OpenFlow. So OpenFlow sort of went from kind of an experiment. The community was enamored in OpenFlow and dynamic provisioning. Thank you. And it kind of blew through the community really quickly, and so now it's kind of common. So the time is compressed, and that's a challenge.
So my other questions, maybe I'll reserve till later in the session.
Right, but your response there actually leads me to another question, because you mentioned OpenFlow, and Klaas previously said that if you're a Cisco sales rep, probably more money in focusing on big campuses than on NRENs, because one big campus can probably have a larger budget than the NREN for that country, so they're buying lots of gear. But OpenFlow is actually also campus technology. It was developed by campus people. It was deployed first in campuses. So is it also that the real network innovation now in our space actually takes place on the campuses, and therefore the campus people are also more interested for you guys to work with than in innovative innovation projects than going to the NREN, who's mostly just the operator and doing transport between these campuses where the innovation happens.
That's a really fair point. Because I think the stretch objectives from the NRENs come from the professors and scientists that are saying, I need these kinds of functionalities, or a campus saying, yes, I'm very glad that you have this capability, but I'm now all wireless and all portable, so how do I deal with mobile devices? We're all at the football match, the big goal is scored, everyone hits send on their cell phone and the network dies. So what are the techniques that researchers are doing to try and resolve that or model it in the future? And so when the NRENs are willing to accept those kinds of challenges from their end users, then I think rising waters lift all boats. If, on the other hand, you sort of say, well, we'll leave it at the end, we'll leave it with the universities and the researchers, and we'll be a lowest common denominator server at services at a discount price, then you'll lose. Then the justification for actually having an NREN starts to erode.
So does that mean that if we want to engage you guys more in innovation projects, we actually need to bring the campus people in here as well to create that dynamic, because they are actually the bigger part of the innovative capacity of this community. And if they're not present in, there are not very many campus people here. And if they
you have only a handful of posters.
Yeah, and if they
like 6 really good posters there with
if they aren't showing up, we are losing much of the attraction, both in terms of market space and in terms of bright idea space, right? That brain space that would make it interesting for you guys.
I went to the Genie Engineering Conference in Atlanta, Georgia 2 months ago. And it was all about cloud storage and virtualized resources, and all that was really, really cool. But in the back room, there were probably 60 poster sessions of students that were developing network-enabled applications to run over that infrastructure and run in those instances. And that's where I took my energy from. These are the next generation of high-quality people that I want to hire at Ciena.
Yeah.
Well, I got the mic.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to continue a little on the parts we just been taking. When I started, well, not quite when I started, but some years ago, I could get away with saying, "Oh, it's just a network." So it really didn't matter if I unplugged the cable from time to time, as long as I replugged it fairly fast. That means within a minute or two. Nowadays, it seems that everybody wants to relate to service level agreements, and it's very important that the network is up and running every 24 hours, 25 if possible, a day all year long, and that really ruins my reason to exist, because then I'm just an ISP. I want to be able to make these disruptives to ruin the network and have the universities lose their internet connection. I understand that that could be a problem in some cases. So maybe we should split the NRENs and say, well, there's part of it that's just an internet provider. Leave that to the industry.
Yeah, some networks are working that way, right? They have a production network and they have an experimental or test bed environment for
so some
exactly
kind of
those
NREN
kind of
too.
breakable things.
Well,
some don't.
But actually, I think you have an unprecedented ability to run experimental services over your networks. That used to be very hard. That's much easier. And with SDN, or I prefer SDN over OpenFlow. With SDN coming, that is even more so the case. What I think you are right about is that the OSI model approach, where one layer didn't know anything about another layer, that is under a lot of stress. And I do believe that applications and middleware need much more visibility of the underlying network. And again, software-defined network, network function virtualization, all those buzzwords are in a way programmatic interfaces to lower layer elements. And yes, I think you need those. So, but I think you can offer those as an NREN, at least up until the middleware level, but I think also higher order services.
And another question, another way to turn this could be, do we pay you back? I mean, you need something from us, some innovation perhaps, some real-life experience with all the things you make. I mean, today, a 100 gigabit interface, that's almost commodity. And I don't know how much the NRENs, the research community, took part in developing this. But do you get what you need from us?
Yeah, so there's, as far as the development of the 100 gig transmission technology, there was actually an awful lot of university interaction and a fair number of really stretch objective trials done with that technology, principally here in Europe and principally with SurfNet for us. We were doing stuff that was flaky prototype and not baked and breakable, and prototype boards and that kind of stuff. And yeah, so here we are all these years later, and it's kind of coin of the realm. Yes, it's a commodity interface, but from a capacity perspective, people are experimenting with 200, 400 terabit per second networks at distance. It's easy to go chassis to chassis, but not over hundreds of kilometers or thousands of kilometers.
But I think it's more or less analogous to what you were saying about what we can offer. It's also what we can get. I forgot the third one. It was people and money, and what was the third?
Equipment.
Equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not equipment what we can get from you. It's not any more money. At least not at the levels that you can get in other sectors, but it's the people. So as long as you keep doing really interesting stuff, we will find you.
Kees.
Kees Negger, Surf. During my time in SurfNet, I had good relations with all your panelist companies, so I can speak with some experience. What I miss in the discussion now is we should much clearer clarify the different roles. So as Rodney already said, I'm the inside world, I'm not the outside world. Well, there are NRENs, and not NRENs are the same. And NRENs have different roles. As Jan said, one of the roles is to be an ISP. The other role is to be ahead of what the market delivers, because we have very special customers in our universities that want to be bleeding edge solutions. You need to define the roles very carefully, otherwise you cannot agree on there's a win-win situation to do things jointly together. And the people over there also have different roles, as Klaas said, and Rodney. I'm not from sales, so I don't care about the revenue, but in the end, of course, they do care that their companies survive. No. And so there is some indirect interest as well.
Of course, yeah.
But so in my view, one of the win-win situations from the NRENs in the past, the two biggest ones, was to develop a new market for them. And in addition to that, it was the internet market. It didn't exist, and it's the NRENs that created it. And the other one is to test out new technology to provide solutions to the emerging market. That is the innovative part of it. And with respect to the NRENs, if they are not ahead of what the common commodity market provides, they don't have reason to exist, because economy of scale will then always have a preference for the common market. And in your case, Jan, I don't think if you are serving universities at the moment, you can afford to even disconnect them for 2 minutes, because in the university in the Netherlands, they have real-time access to the internet during exams, and you kill exams if you just pull the plug. So you can't do that. So, and if you're not able to provide that service, you better leave it to level 3 or Cisco or etc. And that means you have to define your role. Do I want to be a test bed for new technology? Do I want to be a reliable service provider, etc.
Any comment on that from? Oh.
Well, I guess we pretty much all said it in various ways. In the introduction, I already said, in the end, we are here to make money, our companies, and I am not at all talking down on our sales force, because in the end, that's why we can sit here. They pay our salaries. But yeah, I completely agree. That's where you have to be. And I guess that's the question I would pose to you guys. Are you really now at that forefront? Are you trialing technologies that will find their way into other markets? I'd really like to be convinced, and I'd like to be able to convince my bosses that that is the case.
That's a very good question.
Behind you.
I mean, Kees.
Right behind your case.
And Keith first, and then Lidje afterward.
So, say it again. I was interrupted because I thought I couldn't say anything.
Oh, so I said, I posed the question, are the NRENs looking for those new frontiers? Are they developing technologies that will find their way in other markets and will define new markets?
Some will and some won't. And my current concern is that the industry that was very innovative and killed the telecom incumbents are now becoming internet incumbents.
Yeah. Right.
And the current internet is simply not good enough for our research and education community. So the good NRENs will have to try and improve what you deliver today. And some companies will be interested to be part of that challenge, and they may be the surviving incumbents, and the others will simply disappear.
Yeah, in this week, Cisco Live is going on, and John Chambers said exactly that yesterday. I usually don't pay too much attention to these marketing messages, but what he said was there are now 10 or so big players in the market. There will be 2 or 3 left of those current big players. Of course, he believes that Cisco will be one of them. And the rest will be those small companies that are now out there, that are white labeling solutions, and that are able to step up to the new challenges. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question that, let's say, seen from the other side. I think already internet to engage a little bit better with the vendors, maybe because most of the research and development of of some big vendors is in the US and they are American, so they have different contacts. Do you think Terena should have, or should look at a kind of an engagement plan with some of the vendors? And if yes, what should the plan contain? Because this is also sometimes one of the things that maybe we should have better strategy to engage at a different level with the vendors.
I can respond, but it becomes a little bit incestuous, all because that's. So as to Internet 2 doing a little bit better job, yes, I think so. I think that is because in Europe and that was certainly also the case for me, and when I was in university, that was very much the case. Everything that had to do with commerce was like a dirty word. And I still encounter that a lot when I'm in an environment like this where everybody knows me. It's different. But if I come to a university campus and they don't know me, they are incredibly reserved. They think that the only reason I'm there is to screw them, instead of trying to reach a mutually beneficial outcome, which I believe is in the long term much better also from a commercial point of view, but that aside. So I think in the US it is a little bit more accepted. Also their funding models are different, so they are more interested in engaging industry. I think from our companies, and let me talk from my own company, there is also definitely a problem. Cisco is a Silicon Valley originated company, very much American company, so I said before, we have millions and millions and millions of research money going into universities, but those universities are Stanford, MIT, Harvard, Duke, because John Chambers went there, and a couple more of those, and then in Europe it's Harvard and Cambridge. And no matter how often I say, look at what they're doing at that university there, we need to be engaged. That's a hard sell. And that is hard to change. So to your question, should Terena have an engagement plan? Yes, I think you do. It's just not that easy. But Rodney said so happily, we are part of the community. I don't always feel that way, I have to be honest. Yes, we do pay, and yes, we are associate members, so we get to sit in the GA. We are not allowed to vote. I think that in itself is fine, but I don't think we are more or less with CERN. We are sort of like the stepchildren of the NREN community. No, but seriously, I think... I honestly believe that we have not for the sales part, not of the commodity hardware, software, services, that there is a natural vendor-buyer relation, but for the joint development of internet technology, of helping the internet along, I think we have a common agenda, and I think we should explore that more and try to help each other out and be really a partner instead of any other type of relation.
Rodney, Jens?
Yeah, I fully agree. Should there be a direct relationship? I think, in my perspective, when I'm talking for level 3, I can interact and I can make sure that the right people get on the table with you. For those who didn't know, I am a salesperson, so I'm very happy with the feedback of my colleagues here sitting here. Indeed, if this is the first time that I'm around in such a conference, and I don't think that there are many salespeople here around. I haven't seen any or many of my competitors, so to say, and I really hope to bring the message that because level 3 is here, we express to you that we're committed to this business and not here for the short win, but really in the business there for the long run. And in the long run, and that's your key word, Klaas, is partnership. And I'm really looking or trying to find a way where we can work more closely together as a partner. And if that will be a win-win situation for both the NRENs and the company, I'm not sure yet. But at least sharing information with each other, that's where it starts.
Well, I was just going to say, an engagement, strategy is a very good thing to have. The nature of the engagement is the hard part to arrive at. From our perspective, we've always tried to rise to a challenge. So if you want sort of cycles to come and meet and debate, those are going to be very hard to secure. But if you want a contributor to the moonshot that says, we have a real challenge, something that we're really going to try and pull off that's never been done before, then you capture our imagination. Then you get some extra investment, some extra energy in people that really want to come and participate in that. Because I don't need any more meetings. I have lots. I don't need any more emails. My basket is full. But by golly, I love a great challenge, and if that's out there, and you ask for us to contribute, we can determine very quickly if the planets align and if it makes sense for us to jump in. And when we do, we'll jump in with both feet.
Just jumping onto the thing of comparing how we do it in Europe and maybe Internet 2 or other American networks are doing a better job. It has me thinking, is that also related to the way we do procurement, the way we do engagement, the way we do, when things are very formal? In Europe, when we buy something, we have to go through tender process and very formal collaboration structures, whereas in the US, my impression is that they can be more flexible about how they do things.
In most cases, at least in the education community, it's public money. Right. And so there are rules about how you spend public money. And so whether you have, EU procurement rules or process tender, I think that's pretty common as you move around the world. Different countries have different rules. But particularly with R&E, if you're spending public money, there's an accounting for that, and you can't be trivial.
Right. So is that part of a problem here, that it's more difficult to do these innovation projects together because we have to be very structured in how we talk to you, or isn't that a problem?
Can I say something about that, Lars?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. We already learned from Jens that sometimes his hands are tied because of stupid procurement documents brought to him. So it's very important to know what is available and what comes available. Certainly when you want to be leading or bleeding edge. And also to draft your procurement document in a way that it will serve your needs and also the needs of those who react, so that there will be a win-win situation at the end.
Sure.
And if you don't do it correctly, you will be hit because of its rules. But my experience is, if you play this game in all honesty and really define what you want and allow flexibility for the implementations, then the procurement rules are not a problem at all. But what is important is that you know each other, in the sense that you know what is and will become available, and there it's good to have CTO people rather than just salespeople, because they can bring you in contact with people who are working on the next generation, and sometimes they are quite willing to give you some insight. And if you have many of these relationships, you will discover what will become real and what is just a fancy idea of a company that will run out of business if they put all their money in that basket and whatever. But you have to make your own judgment, and at the same time you have to bridge the gap with your user community on the demand side. You are the one who should know what they need, and need it well, and the procurement is to bridge the gap.
No, there wasn't a hand going up. Any comment?
No, maybe I can say something about it. The way we work within level 3 communications is, if we approach a customer or an NREN or whatever, we always go with two people. One is the commercial contact and one is the technical contact, so to say. So the technical expert, let me phrase it like that. So, and all the new features that we have in our network or expansion plans or whatever, that is definitely something that the technical expert can bring to the table. If there are more details required, we bring more people to the table, the product managers or even CTO if required. That's the way we work with level 3, and I think that's the right approach if you want to establish a long-term relationship with whatever customer is there.
And one thing I forgot to mention just right now: if you want to be bleeding edge and you want to consult potential providers, you have to be very clear that you have a consultation phase and a procurement phase, and don't mix these two, because then you run into trouble with the procurement rules.
Right.
The thing that I would like to add to what Jens was saying, I think it is not enough to have a technical person and a salesperson. It's also what type of technical person you bring. And also Cisco, of course, goes in with a systems engineer and an account manager. If we are talking about run-of-the-mill procurement, that's fine. These system engineers are actually extremely good people that have an amazing grasp over a wide area of technologies. The thing is, if you are going to do bleeding edge, those are not the guys you need there. So the challenge is to get the, as Kees calls them, the CTO office type of people at the table. And again, also even more than the amount of dollars that you get to spend, the amount of technical talent that you have to spend on these kind of engagements is even more of a scarce good. And we are all competing to get those people in our companies. So also for them, it has to be worthwhile. Why would they spend their valuable time on going to NREN A and not to NREN B or University C or Enterprise D?
I think Kees raises the notion of a consultative process, a period of exploration, and that can start right here. You know, we have companies as members of TNRENs participating here in this conference as a vehicle for communications, to share ideas. Well, the sessions have been excellent at this conference. The booths in the coffee shop have been the home for a lot of that consultation.
Yeah, so to me at least, it much of this comes back to a sense that when I started getting involved with the NREN space, far too long ago, right, that we had this sense that it might not have been actually true, but at least it was the feeling that we were developing new stuff and that you guys were taking it and turning it into products, and then we were sort of promoting an industry together. Right. These days, if we're lucky, I think, we get a beta 3 months before it hits the mainstream market, right, to stretch it a little bit. And so there's a big difference there. And hearing some of the things that have been said in this session, one thing that strikes me is that back then, many of the people who were working on these things with the NREN weren't really NREN people, they were campus people. But there wasn't that much of a distinction between the community. It was very small, right? So many of the NREN people, campus people were sort of the same. These days, it's become much bigger, and there's much more of a split between the campus people and the NREN people. And as Jan says, the NREN people are ISP people running an operation.
I mean, the networks have become bigger. The number of connected schools have increased in quantity. I'm not sure there's been an exponential growth in the number of schools teaching network engineering or telecommunications.
No.
You know, so I mean, if you're looking for those innovators and those students, you know, I'm quite certain it's not been an exponential growth in the number of those schools. And in fact, because communications in some respects has become easy, a lot of those students have gone into more general, you know, software engineering or electrical engineering programs. And so the places where people are really focused on systems engineering, engineering cloud computing, engineering protocols, you know, work within the standards organization is something that you know, is interesting for some and definitely boring for others. But
so my question coming out of this is there an opportunity or an interest in getting us back to being early in the innovation cycle? And if so, what would that require? Would that require bringing back the campus people, or would it? How would we do that if we wanted to do that?
I think one important word here is trust, and I think on both sides we have sometimes betrayed each other's trust, and it is really hard to gain that back. If I look at my own experience, it has taken me a couple of years to get the wireless people inside Cisco to see the value of working with the Eduroam community. Right. And now they are. And they have learned that they can trust that community to come with honest, brutally honest feedback. Right. And like Cisco for providing them with bleeding edge stuff, rather than go out there, they gave us crap that doesn't work yet. But it often even is even, I should probably say, especially on the personal level, that these kinds of things are happening, and those contacts have not been there in many cases. So I sometimes see myself almost as a matchmaker rather than a technologist.
Right.
I certainly like the notion of trust. I think in terms of creating an environment to go back to that, in some respects, some NRENs are already doing that with the testbed models that I was describing before. The invitation for students or vendors, for that matter, to have a testbed, an opportunity to try new things. I used to make a differentiation between an experimental network and a research network. An experimental network was one where maybe it was done in private, maybe it was a bake-off or an evaluation that wasn't in the public domain. It was a test or an experiment. Whereas a research network was a grand exercise that involved the open community. And I still think that the opportunity for both those endeavors are there. But if it's only a production network with SLAs and commitments that don't allow breakable technologies, then no, I can't go there. At least not with that.
So we need to remember, is what you're saying, that when we do test beds, and we've started doing that, Xiang is doing a big test bed exercise, others are doing big exercises like that. That is an opportunity to bring you guys in and have you as active participants.
One of the challenges of this conference has been the lack of high-speed connectivity to stage groundbreaking demonstrations. You know, we've had some good connectivity and there's some excellent demos in the booth, but if you wanted to do a test, you know, back to Copenhagen or some other Norgenet experiment on a grand scale, this wasn't the venue for it.
Right.
You know, so maybe Terina should look at that being a requirement when they set up these conferences, if those kind of grand experiments and demos are part of the mission. because the dialogue's been great. It's just that if you were looking for that technology thing, it didn't happen this time.
Maybe I can add one thing.
Yeah, sure.
The word trust, it's even in the vision of level 3. We want to be the trusted network party. So I think that's a very, very strong message to the audience here as well.
Right. So some of these testbed things and some of these experiments that are going on, at least in Europe, happen in the context of programs like the Future Internet Program. That has this grand vision, and the EU is putting lots of money into it, and they have this idea of doing what they call PPP type projects, public-private partnerships, where they try to create formal projects that with EU sponsoring and typically to build test beds or experiments. If these types of approaches are actually formally engaging you in parts of the activities, like Xi'an has a testbed activity, should we include as formal partners with resources and EU funding and all of it, the likes of you, or do we need to find other models for doing this?
Well, PPP and formal as two words in the same sentence scare me. Because PPP usually has a connotation of a lot of administrative overhead and baggage and very difficult to negotiate and manage and produce. On the other hand, the spirit of a public-private partnership is wonderful, and we do that all the time, I think.
Yeah, the same goes for Cisco. Actually, we are very hesitant to get into these kind of projects because the overhead is so high, and for academic institutions it's different. They pay their PhD students from that money. We are not in there for the money, and we do get an incredible amount of bureaucracy on us, and then also even with things like the géant open calls, then what do? They make it a lightweight process, but then you have to fill in those A and B forms, etc. So it is still a lot of work, and we are not in there for the money. So what we usually do with European projects, we say, no, we only want to be there as a 0% partner or an associate member or stuff like that, because then please keep us away from that part of your...
Yeah, I mean, I've turned down grants before because I didn't have the ability to handle the administrative overhead.
Right. Okay.
You know, if we're going to do it, we'll pay for it. And, you know,
well,
it drives the researchers insane, though. You turn down the grant.
No, but
how big was it?
It's an important message from our community, and I would have hoped that Jean-Luc was in the room. He isn't, but I can, relay the message.
Yeah, but every good researcher has like a 30% overhead background process just running on the next grant, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's foreign to me.
If it's worth doing, we'll do it.
Right.
And that relatively bit of money from the EU is not going to change that. If it's not worth doing, we still sometimes do it because we want to be friendly to our partners. But I argue always very hard against that, because I think if you don't think it's worth doing, don't do it.
Right.
So we redefine it to people-to-people projects.
In my introduction, I already said something about, or I probably a bit later down the road, something about partnership, an ongoing engagement. That is the kind of thing that I honestly believe would be beneficial for us both. And the machinery for these kind of projects, well, by the time you start, you are 1 year down the road, and then you have written down what you will deliver 3 years later down the road. I don't think those are the timelines that are interesting.
Right. Michael?
Last question, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
I guess we're about to finish.
Yeah.
Okay, having been to sessions like this over the last few years, this is essentially an industrial liaison session. How do you feel about the fact that normally the rooms are woefully empty?
Oh, we show up anyway because we're suckers for punishment. No, what the other session is the lightning talks. So, I think there were a number of really exciting topics. So if I wasn't here, I'd be there.
So that's the learning. We don't want to be parallel to that one.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of content at the conference, and it's always a challenge. How profound is the information from the industry partners versus the information sharing that's taking place in other sessions? It's something that the program committee can evaluate. You know.
Yeah, and this goes also, I guess, back to my earlier comment about betraying trust. That has happened in the past also often enough. I've been to sessions like this and got an extremely commercial talk, and next time I would not bother to show up anymore. Right. I would also go to the lightning talks. So I guess you guys are also suckers for being here.
Well, I kind of like, you know, the approach. However, the program committee used its magic previously, I don't know, but I thought it was kind of amusing this year that there was kind of an essay question as an entrance exam to come and sit here, which allowed us to at least publish a position in the proceedings, and that has value, even if the room isn't full.
Right. Yeah. All right. So with that, thank you very much, all three of you, for being here and for sharing openly your opinions on how to collaborate with the NREN community. Thanks to all of you for coming. Before you go, a few closing remarks. There's a gala dinner tonight. You're welcome to come to the gala dinner venue without your badge. You just won't get any food or any wine. So if you want any of that, do bring your badge. There will be buses. I won't repeat the times for the buses because it will be different for different hotels.